I'm Jordan.
And I'm Rosanna.
And on this podcast, we explore how to take life off autopilot
and relentlessly pursue a life worth living together. Hello, and welcome to Season 5, Episode 3 of the Relentless Pursuit podcast, Happy, Healthy Kids. So we've already kind of discussed that, over the last few weeks, things have been a little crazier than usual. We were in Texas for a while. Jordan's mom had passed away. I'm in the middle of the busiest wedding season I've ever had. So much so that, my head is spinning. I've promoted an assistant to a lead. I've taken on more team members. I've got people filling in the gap. So between that, the kids being back to school full time, thank you that they're back and they're, back in business, full days, all day, every day.
In September, like May, we see this the most where their sports and different activities are really in full swing.
Yes, we've got ball, soccer, gymnastics.
We're busy family, professionally, personally.
Dance, piano, preschool even. I mean, it's a lot of running. There's a lot of overlap. And lately I have just felt my head spinning. So just to try and keep everything in line and on time and on schedule, I found myself dropping the ball and a few things falling through the cracks. And I've looked at Jordan and said, are we doing this right? And, by this, I mean, parenting. We've got one in junior high. We got one in preschool. Everybody's needs are different. And I feel like I thought it would be easier. Just like people warned me, it doesn't get easier. It gets harder in different ways.
Yeah. But that's an important question just to continually ask about parenting. Are we doing this right? What are we missing? What's slipping through the cracks? What can we recalibrate?
Right. So, we've got pressing questions like, should our kid have a cell phone when all of his friends seem to, or you're told have a cell phone? How much screen time is too much for our 2-year-old if I need to have a call, right? I need to keep him engaged and out of my hair.
Quiet.
So, what are some of those things that you're doing that you said you would never do in order to get it all done? And Jordan is always a good reminder to me that we are still doing a job. We're good parents. We're attentive. We're invested. We spend time with them, but it's not always going to look the same. It's not always going to be easy. And the struggle is real. Sorry
when you use
that
phrase.
I hate when he laughs at me, because it's a phrase he would never use.
But to your point, I think we're also playing the long game too. So any given day, we may not feel like a great parent. But you think over time, what are the experiences that we're facilitating as well? And continually coming back to this question so that you can, day by day, try to work towards what you really see as best for your kids.
Yeah. So the format for this episode, it's kind of like a tips episode, kind of recommendations based on research for happy, healthy kids. So we have 10 tips rooted in some research or background that somebody else has done for us. I got the 10 tips from a article called teledoc.com, Health Talk, 10 Tips for Healthy, Happier Child. And I think that's good because sometimes we get caught up in the very frivolous things of what are my kids wearing to school pictures? Is his haircut? Is her favorite gymnastics uniform clean? When she can just wear another one, putting this pressure on yourself to be perfect or to have everything as it should be when sometimes it's just okay to have it be as it is.
Yeah. So, and we'll talk about that too, because at what point do you settle for something being just okay with your parenting or with your household versus really setting an exceptional bar for yourselves and for your kids? I think that's an important question to dissect. But overall, we'll share these 10 tips that we glean from this, but also talk about what we do and maybe more importantly, what we don't do or haven't figured out yet. So you can kind of learn along with us, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you realize when you're older is that you don't have all the answers and that you're just in search of them, and that you can glean something from someone, but you can be honest, I don't have that figured out.
I've been saying for years, I'm not smart because I have the answers, but I'm smart because I have the questions.
Whoa, that's what we tell our kids anyways, right? What questions are you asking, right?
So Dad, you got a lot of questions. You don't seem to have any answers, Dad.
Yeah. Any other thoughts just on parenting in general or a preface to these tips, or should we dive right in?
No, let's dive in.
Okay. So the first one, we're going to just take turns. I'm going to go first. The first one is to encourage healthy eating. what we get out of our kids depends on what we put into our kids, right? They need the right balance of vitamins, minerals, carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And so as parents, we try and do the best job we can with setting a good example with healthy eating habits, getting them involved in the kitchen, so they have a positive lifelong relationship with food, because that begins in childhood. Now, we all know,
I think that's
right? We
it
all
comes
know
with
this.
parenting territory. You have
Sure.
to feed them good food.
Great. Then you have a slew of kids, and they're all at ages where they can talk and express their distaste for what it is that you're cooking, regardless of how well you cook or what the snacks are, right? Like, no one wants refrigerator snacks, which would, some kind of dairy or fruit or vegetable. They like the pantry snacks. So if you're a real parent in real-time parenting, you know that the snacks are a struggle, right? Like, how many and what kind and when. I often point my kids, like, how about a healthy snack? Grab something from the fridge, and like the death stare comes. Like, they want popcorn. They want they want something that is prepackaged with
Really
preservatives.
amazing, like how big of an appetite for junk they have. And I wonder if we can reverse time. Like, is there a way to like reprogram their taste buds?
But if you talk to any parent, food is always a struggle. And so are the snacks. And then we all know this, dinner time, right? Probably some of the biggest struggles from the time our kids are little
Let's
about
be
what
honest.
they eat.
Like this, we know we should be encouraging them to eat healthy food, but we really struggle to get them to do that well, habitually.
Right. And some kids are better than others. We have some great vegetable eaters, and then we have some that don't even eat vegetables at this point. We have some great fruit eaters, and we have other ones that like literally eat no fruit at this point.
We try to force it. Like, at what point do you...
Right, like at what
draw
point
that
do you like
hard
force
line?
you force feed them, and they're crying and you're crying and still nobody's eating broccoli, like, right? But you're trying to like teach them, like, okay, with dinner we have vegetables, let's just take one bite, right? We've done the let's bribe you to have one bite of broccoli for an entire pumpkin scone. Like, really, who's winning here? They're totally winning, but you're trying to kind of make that trade. Right? Is it hard and firm? This is your dinner, eat it or don't. I've seen that. We've tried that. I've seen some parents eat it or don't, but if you don't eat it now, you're eating it for breakfast. And if you don't eat it for breakfast, you're eating it for lunch, right? Like, we get mad about this. Parents in general, like I've heard all kinds of things. I'm going to save it until you eat it. Like, but then we have to be careful about like kids and eating, their relationship to food, their habits with food, because that can be a slippery slope as well.
Yeah. And so I think that you and I balance one another a bit, because if, one tries to like play the hard line in a sense, then we can kind of see when it's really not going anywhere, and then to persist or to double down may make the circumstance worse, and we can kind of pull one another back from that brink, so to speak. But even just like, I'm just sad that it even has to be like depicted in that way. Like, is it wrong with us? Is it something wrong with our kids? Is it just culture? Like, what has kind of bred the debate over vegetables into a battleground with kids? I just don't feel like it should be that way, and maybe there's better ways to go about that.
Yeah. I mean, and we've got like, if they're hungry, they'll eat, right? And there are times that they don't eat. We've sent Roman to bed more recently with no dinner. And then, we used to be the parents to be like, okay, well, you can't send him to bed on an empty stomach. Let's give him a banana and a piece. Like, we're drawing some hard and firmer lines, because we realize sometimes
I would give him the banana if he ate it. Yeah.
Well, if he ate the banana, but oh wait, we don't eat fruit right now, so we're not eating the banana. So, it's kind of this juggle of like trying to read your kids, reading what they need, also playing the long game. Like, we eat breakfast and lunch fine, dinner seems to be a problem. Or doubling down on what we're eating at breakfast and lunch, right? Like smoothies that are filled with fruit, that Roman has no idea that it's all fruit and some yogurt, and he's getting them in there, slipping things in, trying the multivitamin, trying to offset some of that. But it's tiring. And we have 4. So it's a game, right? Like, who's going to eat what when, but this is dinner and this is what it is, and these are the expectations, but it's a battle.
Yeah. And I think that I think the basics, at least, is that they know what healthy eating looks like. And even if as a kid, like your default is like the sweets and the candy or the carbs or the snacks, at least the basic expectation has been indoctrinated to them. And as they get older and have desires for their own healthy living, like, they have that foundation to go back to.
Well, right now,
I hope that's how it plays out in my head.
Right. We're laying the groundwork. We're building the foundation. They see that all of the food groups are represented and in what portions, and it's discussed. Most recently, I've taken the taken off my plate making their lunches. I supervise, but they have started making their own sandwiches. We have 11, 9, and she'll be 7 in a few weeks. And at 7, I would have never made the boys make their sandwich, but she makes her sandwich. And then I'm watching what goes in, reminding them, let's add a piece of fruit to that bag, or like that's a granola bar and pretzels. Why don't you choose one of those? Like trying to talk them through how they should be packing a lunch. And then if they're hungry after lunch, they know what they need to pack more of. And it's not more snacks, but it's like, how about a vegetable? How about a cheese stick? How about some yogurt? Trying to facilitate that conversation. And even now, a few weeks into the school year, like 6, they see that, and they're like, Mom, you don't have to remind me. I have a cutie, I have, a cheese stick, and I have this. And it's, oh, great. Like we're kind of at least balancing it out. We're thinking about what we're eating and what's going in. And so while dinner might still be a struggle with zucchini on zucchini night, they are learning some of those things.
Yeah. Quick side note, you ever notice how things you ate and loved as a kid are just like so gross as a grown-up?
So disgusting.
You said granola bars. I used to eat those daily as a kid. And I tried one like a month or two ago, and I was like, this is awful. Anyway. All right, so that's number 1. Number 2 is prioritizing sleep and teaching your kids about sleep. So I feel like a lot of times kids, don't need to be taught as much about sleep because they just do it, right? They get tired and they fall asleep, and they tend to sleep for long hours.
Well, you hope.
You hope, right. But making sure that you facilitate that. So, kids who are obviously infants get 12 to 15 hours of sleep. Toddlers need about 11 to 14. Preschoolers 10 to 13. And then when you're school age, you're looking at like 9 to 11 still. And then by your teen years, still like 8 to 10 hours of sleep. So I think you can facilitate that relatively easily when they're young, right? You have like a bedtime, and maybe that varies like a weeknight versus a weekend. But for the most part, they have a set pattern. Now, our kids certainly have a pattern because they all wake up at the same darn time every morning of usually 6 a.m. or earlier. But thankfully, they also go to bed early enough where they're still like meeting this hourly count, so to speak. So I think in terms of happy, healthy kids, like this one kind of takes care of itself. But my goal is to, just like we're teaching them about vegetables, like to still like teach them about it, because by the time they get to their teen years and I have a lot more freedom over their schedule, like we're not going to be tucking them into bed at a set bedtime.
Right.
They're going to have homework or activities and probably even come home after you and I have gone to sleep. Still giving them that foundation of understanding the role that sleep plays. And I think it's so important we talk about it. We talk about our own sleep, so that they understand when they need to make their own decisions, what they're basing those decisions off of.
Right. I think our kids think that they go to bed and we stay up and party. And a lot of times we're following them to bed. Like they're in bed and, we're lucky if we're up another half hour, and it's usually because we have something to do. But like we're going to bed because we start our days early. We start with morning workouts. Like you need that sleep. And, like kids struggle when they're tired and they're cranky, right? They struggle with a lot of things, like whether it's with school or athletics or even just like eating or being in a good mood. It's like when they are not well rested, they are not happy, healthy kids. And so we have to kind of facilitate that. Roman gave up his nap super early. But then he was also going to bed later just because he has older siblings and we were out, and like we weren't doing the same justice we did with him that we did with our kids when they were all small and they were all not in sports. And so like I see how important it is for him, like really by like 7:30, because he hasn't napped and doesn't nap, like he should be in bed, and a lot of nights he's not. It's usually 8:15.
Well, with toddlers, they get super fussy when they're tired.
Right.
So in some ways, this and the next one too you're about to share, like it validates some of the conversations I had with the kids, like especially over the summer. Like for us, summer time is much more flexible. So at certain points, I would take the kids out onto the driveway and we do like a morning catapano like workout routine.
Wait, did you want me to get to naming what the third one was, or did you just
Not
want
yet.
to talk about it? Oh, okay.
But I would have the kids list like 4 specific things. First, I would say, repeat after me. They're like, okay. I would say, my body is a temple, not a trash can. And I read that somewhere. I forget where I read that.
Was that one of those Jocko things?
I think that might have been from Way of the Warrior Kid. And like just having them like repeat that and understand that, and then they say it back to each other at other points throughout the day as well. And they don't always apply it, but at least like that concept is there. But then I would have them list 4 things. Like, what are the 4 things we're going to focus on to make sure that we are taking care of our body? And healthy food was one of them, and sleep was one of them too. So the next one you're about to list is one of them as well. But then hygiene was the fourth one, which is not on our top 10 here.
Okay.
But like basic hygiene, eating healthy food, prioritizing sleep, and
Number 3 is move your body. So both the CDC and the American Heart Association agree children need at least 60 minutes of exercise a day. So, we need to, as parents, come up with a plan of like, how do we reach this hour daily goal of physical activity? And it's the
that's
physical.
really not that much.
No, it's
for a
really
kid.
not that
Yeah.
much. You would think about how much. I mean, they are seated a lot of times at school, but like, even gym class at this age is like 20 minutes. So like, even if they go to gym every day, which they don't have gym every day, that's only 20 minutes. But it has, moving your body has both physical and mental health benefits. And so I think sometimes we kind of focus on the fact that it's only just like physical. It's like for your body, it's like right to keep your weight in check or to be healthy or whatever. But there are mental benefits to moving your body, emotional benefits to moving your body consistently. Obviously benefits of lower disease, risk of disease, higher life expectancy, and improved self-confidence can be achieved from moving your body. But yeah, I mean, an hour, if you have soccer 2 days a week, that takes care of 2 days a week, but how else are you, facilitating moving? And so with the boys, now that they're old enough, they're walking the dog on their own. And for them, that's, it's 20 minutes a day. They're both supposed to walk the dog. Each every day. So there's like 20 minutes built in. We have a trampoline, which we've been seeing them use more and more, a basketball hoop. So even the things around your house, what do you...
Yeah, the weather really makes a big difference when you can go outside and move your body versus be stuck inside.
Right. But we've done things in the basement where, they've got, scooters and things that they bring in the basement because the floor is unfinished. We've got like a Ninja Warrior course set up. So we do try and facilitate things in and around the house that can inspire them to move their body. But I think the default, especially among this generation, is to sit with a screen.
Well, so let me just get into number 4 then, because I was just thinking this before I realized that this was the next one. Number 4 is setting limits on screens. And I think that kids will naturally want to be active, but they also like very naturally want to like sit and play video games or like sit and watch TV too. I mean, all of us do. So the more I think the more that we do a good job like limiting their vices with screens, not cutting it out completely, but the more we control that, then the better they're just more inclined to get physically active.
Yeah.
Like once we say like you can't do that anymore, they're like, okay, well, what am I going to do? And their inclination is going to be to move.
Sure. Well, and Leo was punished and taken away from screens for the weekend, and so then just to see him like, hey, can I walk across the street and ask the neighbor boy if he wants to jump on the trampoline? Then they went from the trampoline to shooting hoops, and like that was the thing. That's fine, he can come over, but you have to stay outside and play, because there was a restriction set, right? Like, oh wait, we could play, we could run around, we could move our bodies, and so like just like we train ourselves that like we should be moving our bodies every day, we have to train them to know that they have to move their bodies every day, and we do that by signing them up for, intramural sports and all of that. But those seasons end. So like, what else is there besides an organized sport? There are other ways to move your body.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's kind of sad to like have to tell a kid to go move around. Like kids very naturally do that, but it's just some of the things we build up around life. Like, I don't want them to get the message like you can only move around or be physically active if you're involved in this like preset organization, or if it's, like, for adults, maybe it's a little bit better for us to have like a set schedule. Like I have my morning workout, that's my movement for the day. But I feel like kids benefit from being less constrained. Like just go be a kid. And I think the activity follows naturally.
Well, and I think maybe why we're seeing part of the decline too is, we've talked about this notion of kids being overparented and over-restricted. We live in a different world than our parents did, and even that we did, that we would just say, okay, go out into the neighborhood, go play, go to the park, whatever. But now people are a little bit more leery of letting their kids go. So even we've told the kids, well, you have your bikes, why don't you guys just go ride your bikes? And they're like, to where? And you're like, around. Just don't cross that busy street. You have this whole side. You could ride anywhere. Your grandparents' house is in sight. Your friend, like, stop by, see if they want to go to the park. And even they feel reluctant, not because they don't want to move their bodies, but because they feel uncomfortable, like letting the tether loosen now that they're a little bit older.
Yeah. All right. So movement will come for children if we have the right constraints on like screens, for example, and then if we remove some constraints, such as like how closely supervised we feel like they have to be, depending on their age and location.
Well, right.
and
We're not
everything.
going to let our 6-year-old girl go for a jog, but yeah, the boys could be on their bikes, meeting friends at the park and playing.
Yeah. All right. Do we? I feel like I talk about screens all the time. So number 4 is limit screens, and like we've said so many times, like screens themselves are not evil, but they certainly become, something that corrupts us, adults and kids, when used without restraint.
Right. They kind of infiltrate places and spaces that they don't need to.
Yeah.
And I think that's been your biggest thing. It's not that our kids can't play video games and it's not that they can't watch TV, but they're at like designated times and for designated durations, probably longer than they should be sometimes. But let's talk about some of the places and spaces that you like to keep devices out of.
All right. Well, first, like we tell them, I equate screen time to junk food, where it's nice to have a treat, but at the same time, it's not making you a better person. And in fact, too much will damage you. So, and then compare that to some of the healthy kinds of things we could be doing with our time that do make us the kind of person that we want to be. So that's part of the way we try to frame it for kids. But I feel like there's a lot of spaces that we have not allowed devices. First of all, the kids don't have their own personal devices, so none of the kids own their own phone or their own iPad. And if they use it, they don't use either one of our phones.
They don't.
And that's just not allowed. But there's plenty of devices that at certain times, they're allowed to ask and to use. Like namely, like a weekend morning, for example, is probably the prime time that we get those requests. Right. But the family dinner, as we've talked about, is a screenless time. And I think the only one, like you have your Apple Watch, and so like if you peek at that, the kids will even like mention that to you, which I'm proud of. But even when we go out, not that we're out at restaurants often, or at like a family function, sometimes you might see other kids on a screen at the table, and that is a great way to
pacify them and keep them quiet.
right. And I just decided from before we had kids, I'm like, hey, I want my kids to be engaged with the table.
Right. So, right. We do not, prop up phones or iPads at restaurants. We don't bring them with us. Mm-hmm. We've even gone on vacation without stuff like that for them to access. And people think we're a little crazy. Mm-hmm. And maybe we are, but we try and like in spaces where it's supposed to be like a face-to-face setting or a place where we can talk together, we keep screens out of it.
Yeah. Those the long drives to Texas, we're like, okay, like we're going to drive for 4 hours and then we can turn one thing on the iPad that we agree on. And then it's going to be off for like the next 4 hours. And you have to, look out the window, or let's find ways to interact, or you can sleep, but not treating a screen like a default or a right.
Right. Letting them be bored and come up with something to do.
Yeah. Screens in the bedrooms. Also, we don't have TVs in any of the bedrooms, and the kids typically won't have a screen in their bedroom. They do. The biggest time that we break that is when we're recording the podcast.
Yes.
We need them to be quiet.
We send them to their rooms with a closed door and a screen.
Yeah. So we want to lay that out too, just so we don't like seem hypocritical, but to show like it's everything in moderation. So there's certainly like things that we're trying to teach our kids about screens.
And things we're trying to protect them from, because having a screen in a bedroom with a closed door, right? You have wandering eyes, you have wandering fingers. We can't control what's up there. So usually screens are used in a room where there is an adult present, where we can hear what's being played. Like there have been times we're talking and we hear something and we like, what are you watching, right? Because they can start watching something, but in the era in which they live, where they can choose their own adventure at any time and switch between a million things, some of that could get lost in the shuffle. And so there's got to be some oversight.
Exactly. All right. So always things to say about that. What's number 5?
Number 5 is read to your children. It's been proven that books pave the way to success. There is no easier, quicker way to promote lifelong learning and listening than by reading. But according to a national survey, only 42% of children younger than 9 are being read aloud to every day. Only 30% are read aloud to for at least 15 minutes. Read to your kids to build their vocabularies, strengthen their attention, and spark curiosity. I will say that Jordan is so amazing with reading with the kids. He always has been. Right? Yes. And people are like, oh, of course, he's a teacher. He's an English teacher. But he has done just such a fabulous job. And it's not that I don't read, but like this is just something he's super passionate about, something he's really good at. He does all the voices.
Those gets to the point where it's like, well, mom's going to read tonight. So they're like,
It's like it's nothing like a kick in the face at bedtime after a long day. And you know what? What's great is that Jordan takes delight in it. And at the end of the day, I'm kind of just done sometimes with the kids. And so like that's one of those ways where it's just like I can take that burden off myself. It's something that you do, you enjoy, and it's been good. But even, while I don't do a majority of the reading, I still read with the kids. I remember a friend laughed at me. She's like, I said something about like their bedtime routines and reading and like how much reading it is. They're like, well, you don't read all the words and all the pages, do you? I had been a mom for like 9 or 10 years and I was like, well, yeah.
you never skip pages.
No. I'm like always all in, there's ways around it, but it's just a good reminder. Like it doesn't take very long to read, right? So like even now it's just roaming home a majority of the time. And so one of the things that we make sure we do besides like paint and Play-Doh and all of that is, hey, let's go get a book and let's read it. Let's read all the pages. Let's read all the words, and let's read. And so I actually made fun of Jordan probably like a year ago. I'm like, how much longer are we going to read to these kids? Like Jack's going into junior high. Do we need to read to him every night? How long does this last? And, the more you look into it, like the better it is for your kids. Obviously now he's at the point where he's reading at a high school level. He last night was listening to
an audiobook.
Audiobook.
So that's fate. He doesn't need us to like do the bedtime routine. But I feel obligated to do that just as a parent. Like this, just one of the staples, like one of the best gifts I feel like I could give them is a solid reading comprehension, so that when they go to school, like that's kind of the gateway to all other learning that they're going to do. So if they can read, then I think they'll have confidence in everything else that they do afterwards. So that's why I feel like that's just such an easy, it takes commitment and consistency, but it's like just overall like an easy task to sit there and read a book out loud with your kid in your arms.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's like that proximity.
A lot of nights we don't want to. I admit that. I'd rather go to bed or whatever, but that's just one of those kind of, for me personally, I felt like just uncompromising kinds of tasks that I would always do for my kids.
Right. So not always easy, not always preferred, not always what you want to be on the agenda, but super important nonetheless. And I think that really goes hand in hand with number 6.
Number 6, which is fill your home with words. So that means specifically conversation, not just words on the wall.
Right.
But,
yes. You don't need to just hang the words.
Yeah. So like reading is a part of that, but this number 6 builds off of that by talking about conversation itself. I think this is particularly true for 2-parent households, but it doesn't have to be that way. But when kids see 2 adults communicating with one another, that's a very different kind of communication than an adult to a child. So when kids can even just see their parents interacting, and not fighting, but like having
not yelling,
having conversations with one another of one kind or another. And when kids are also either a part of that or like the recipients of that conversation as well, then that really benefits them. So I think this goes back to like, what are some of the barriers to that? And like screens comes to mind. Like there was another study that I had read where within the first hour of kids and parents coming home from school or from work, they're in separate rooms looking at separate screens. And that kind of tears apart the relationship as well as the opportunity for conversation. So screens aren't the only barrier to that, but kind of making time and space for meaningful conversation to take place. And if they see that from the time that they're young age, they'll understand how to interact with adults better, but also it just does wonders for their vocabulary and for their social awareness and so on.
Yeah, I mean, like talking to and with your kids builds a foundation for talking and listening. So like if I want my kids to know that we have an open door policy, like they go to school and something is happening or something has happened or they see something that they want to come home and talk about it, whether to figure it out, to express how they're feeling, like that they need to know that like talking is a way to kind of figure things out together, and that whether it's good, bad, or ugly, like that you're there to listen. And maybe they'll be punished accordingly, but like that you're there to listen to that and they're willing to talk to you.
Yeah. We did, I think I mentioned this earlier too, like we're starting to have what we call family meetings where maybe we'll do a show later on once we've refined this process. It's kind of sloppy right now. But just deciding to, like, we literally just sit around the table and we have maybe one or two topics that we want to just hit as the six of us. Like, let's just talk through something that we're all experiencing or noticing for better or worse so that we can make improvements together. And that's something I'm excited about, and like finding some better ways to facilitate.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about tradition. We've talked a lot about family meal times. We've talked a lot about even just my relationship with my family, and how a lot of it centers around sitting down around a table, usually a meal, and if it's not a meal, a snack or something, where we're breaking bread, right? We had that episode about breaking bread and just sharing with one another. And I think the proof was in the pudding for me about how important this was. Sunday we had friends of ours stop over, just like a short visit. Really, I think they were checking in on you to see how you were after your mom.
Yeah, these are two adults. They're like our friends.
Two adults,
to talk to us.
older than us, came just to talk to us. And at some point, both boys, 11 and 9, came to sit down and wanted to be part of the conversation, wanted to hear what we were talking about, added into the conversation, shared some thoughts that they had. And I think that's a great skill as 11 and 9 years old, instead of like running off to play video games, which I'm sure they did later, or, like being disengaged. They wanted to sit with an adult. They wanted to hear what we were talking about, what was going on. They wanted to contribute and be a part of that. And I think that's a very mature response as to, elementary and middle school kids. Like that is a skill, and that's something that groundwork is laid very early. And if we're not teaching them to do that or to be a part of that, like that's hard to teach later on. It's kind of embedded in what we're doing.
Yeah. So a lot focused on bringing, just noticing like on bringing us together and limiting the things that separate us.
Yeah. And one of the other thing too is like, when we're in the car together, it's interesting to me is I ask the kids, I would love to just turn on the radio and crank it. But my kids often ask for me to shut it off.
They always do. I can't listen to the radio at all. Even like kid songs. Like, can you turn that off? Can you turn that down? Can you close the windows?
So
I have
now,
something to say.
Yeah, so now I ask, can we turn on the music or would you rather talk? And a lot of times they say, I'd rather talk, or they've gotten to understand that this, like a car ride, rather short, because we don't drive real far, is a place to kind of just talk. And sometimes it's just real quiet, and you can see they're looking out the window, they're thinking, it brings up a thought, they share it. Sometimes I just really want to listen to the radio. But I think that's good that they know that that's a space where like it's meant to like talk. Like a lot of times we get in the car and that's when we have a conversation. We're not drowning it out with music or with listening to something else, while that might be an easy default, but we're doing something together.
Yeah. All right, so that one was mine. What's yours?
All right, number 7 is making memories. I think sometimes I put a little bit more pressure on myself to make memories. And we do it as a part of traditions, fall traditions, whether it's apple picking or pumpkin farm, and summer things that we do, and Christmas lights. And like there's all of those traditions that we do. But kids aren't fancy. They want to have fun. They want to make memories. The heart of any meaningful experience is feeling connected. And so are we taking the time to connect with our kids? And I can admit, like, I've been so busy lately where it's like I have to kind of like schedule it in. Where like Roman's at school Tuesday, Thursday. So like usually on Wednesdays, like we do something fun together or something different. Like he can come with me and we go to the grocery store and we do that kind of thing and we pal around and we chit chat. But like, what can I do that, what has he missed out on kind of with the kids home for like a year and a half and not getting to like have me to himself? I'm trying to just be more guarded about that time. And so maybe it is just Play-Doh at the counter, uninterrupted, or maybe it is like outside playing t-ball with him, but those are the things he remembers. And, he looks up at me and he's like, I love you, Mom. And I'm like choked up because I didn't spend $1 million, but.
Well, that's the misconception, I think, is that memories have to be expensive. They have to be unique, but they have to be like just like a big time commitment. But that's not the case. Like most of the memories come from like the spontaneous household moments that we're just present for.
Right. Just engaged in them and what they want to do with us, not what we want them to do away from us.
You know what I think of actually? That this may or may not come true, but I picture the kids gathered around our table like 20 or 30 years from now. They've got their own kids already. You and I are old, and the way we're living now is just gone. but they come back for family dinner, and like one says to the other, "Hey, do you remember that time?" And then I try to guess like what they would fill in the blank with. And I can't imagine. I'm sure that they can say like, "Oh, you remember that time we took this vacation, or we went to this like extravagant outing as a family." But I think like some of the best stories and memories are going to come from the things that just happened as a part of like being together.
Right.
Like the games we made up when we were in the basement, or the time that even we got in trouble for like breaking this thing or losing that thing. And like I think that those are the moments that stand out to us. So I try to imagine my kids 20 years from now looking back on this time, like what's going to stand out.
Yeah. I mean, and it's easy to think that like the trip to Disney is going to stand out, and it will, but so the time that I was jumping on the trampoline with them and I may have peed my pants, like just the funny little
Right.
embarrassing things that happen, or like the very trivial things that meant a lot at the time.
Yeah. So memories come from really just being present enough to make them day to day.
Right.
Okay. Number 8 says, get involved in the things that matter. There's a lot of pressure with this. All right, so what matters? And I think that's a good question just for adults as well. Like, what are you actually pursuing, and what do you say actually matters? So by the time like kids are maturing into young adults, they tend to say that becoming rich or becoming famous matters. And we know now that we're like a very wise 38 years old that doesn't actually matter. I mean, it certainly would
It
be
helps.
nice
It
too,
helps,
right?
sure. Yeah.
But what are some of the virtues that we're trying to inculcate with them?
Well, I think that has to do with like teaching them the importance of not doing things just for yourself, but for others, having shared responsibilities, giving back to the family, giving back to the world, encouraging awareness and better judgment. Like, right. Like moving outside of yourself, I think that has to be taught from a young age.
Right. Being able to love, being able to have empathy and respect, even just like communication skills. Like what are the materialistic things that maybe we more naturally gravitate towards that, upon further inspection really don't have much weight.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I know, but a lot of it is monkey see, monkey do,
Well, that's number. You want to skip to number 10?
I mean, yeah, let's go to number 10. We'll come back to
so
number
everything
9.
we've just talked about has to do with number 10. What's number 10?
And it's model what matters. Like kids are always paying attention. They notice our behaviors, they listen to our words, and they model our choices. Like, are we practicing what we preach? Are we speaking respectfully about people? Are we helping people who need it, right? Mm-hmm. Whether they're having a bad day or there's a cause that we can take up. Do we take pride in our appearance and caring for our things, right? Like, are we eating, like all of the things that we've already
Everything
talked
just
about.
Listed, yeah. Are we sleeping? Are we eating healthy? Are we limiting screen time? Are we reading to them?
Are we working hard and challenging ourselves to do better? Are we creating boundaries? Are we achieving balance? Do we have a positive attitude? Do as I do is the most effective teaching method of all. Like, of course we're going to make mistakes, right? I'm going to yell at my kids. I am going to, I'm going to be stressed out. I'm not going to do all the things that I should all of the time. But when we do make a mistake, even acknowledging out loud, like, you know what, I really messed up. I was really harsh with you right now, and that's from my own frustration. I am disappointed that, this was your behavior, but let's work on being better. How can we do that? How can I help you do that? And so like through all of this, it's, modeling these things with our kids is going to make the biggest difference. Mm-hmm. And it's not about what they're wearing or what their hair looks like. Like how are we raising them to be good people?
Yeah. So I think it doesn't matter what we say. It doesn't matter what we say to our kids. It matters what our kids see us doing. And that just kind of sticks.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest takeaway is number 10. But we skipped to number 9.
Well, do you want to go back to that?
Sure. Number 9, which will end up being the final of 10 recommendations.
It's all right. It's our show. We can do it in any order we want.
Do we want. It says, make space for emotions. We spend so much time focusing on kids' schoolwork and activities, and sometimes our own as well, but we forget about their emotions. And I would say, like, we forget about our own emotions, too. So kids have a hard time naming and understanding their feelings to be able to, like, make appropriate choices, like, stemming from some of those feelings. This says research shows that emotional intelligence predicts over 54% of the variation in success in relationships, effectiveness, health, the quality of a person's life. I would love to hear more about what's meant by that. But it seems like the more you understand your own emotions, then the more just effective as a person you can be. So are we training our kids to be able to experience and name and understand what they're feeling underneath?
Right. Like I'm feeling out of control because, which is causing me to, right, make poor decisions, right? I'm feeling really sad right now, which is causing me to eat my feel. Like, like there's a relationship between how you're feeling and what action you're taking from those feelings. And so if you can't name your feeling and you don't understand why you're feeling that way, then you probably don't understand that you're making decisions that maybe aren't healthy. Mm-hmm. And so obviously that's not a lesson for our 3-year-old, but that's a message or a lesson for our 11-year-old. And for Juliet at this point, it's being able to even just name her feelings.
Right. Just like age appropriate conversations about feelings. And again, that comes from modeling too, where sometimes parents are known for like one emotion, and that's anger. Right. I think that's what kids like maybe see the strongest from us, for better or worse. And but being able to like just better express and articulate thoughts surrounding emotions so that they can then have the permission and the capacity to do the same.
Right. Right. Like how many times are like, I'm so upset with you right now because, but like, do we say like, do we even like talk about like the varying degrees of how we're feeling? Disappointed, frustrated, upset, tired, overwhelmed. Like, are we giving them the vocabulary to learn what those feelings are?
Yeah.
Right. If everything is just mad or sad, that, and if I hear one more kid tell me how they're depressed, that is also like they've heard this word and now they're using it out of context.
Yeah,
and
so the importance of being able to distinguish degrees of emotion. Yeah. So I feel like that's one thing that we do talk about, but like, I mean, you know me, like I'm not just, I'm not gushing emotions all the time. And even so, like, I think along with this too is like I'll admit I'm even somewhat skeptical of emotion because I feel like it can cloud judgment. I want to be like, you're 100% rationalist. Like every decision has like a logical sequence that led to that.
Correct.
And I think that that's appropriate too. Like, are you making this decision like out of this feeling, or do you have reasons for progressing with what you're doing? And I think that's an important question to ask and have them understand those distinctions too.
Yeah.
But that's one we could work on as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that, right, like we have to remember that we're parenting for the first time. Like, it's not like we've done this before. We've never had a junior hire. Like, every time is for the first time. And so, like, we're growing alongside of our kids. We're learning alongside of our kids. And we're not going to do it right. Right? Roman, this is the 4th time we've had a 3-year-old. And we're still not going to do it right because each kid is different and their needs are different and what they need from us is different. And so like having a little bit of grace in terms of figuring that out. I think obviously having a partner to do it with is helpful because in the areas that you lack, I'm there hopefully, and vice versa. Or when sometimes you lean into one of the kids and I'm like, oh, don't be too hard. Like we can kind of see both sides and we can see how some kids need a different approach. And usually one of us can tag in or tag out when we kind of see that shift.
Yeah. Well, what's helpful too is there's like so many parenting resources online, like an article like this, right? This is really just scratching the surface of some things that parents should be thinking about. But like taking advantage of those, then having a conversation like, okay, here's 10 things. Which ones are we feeling really confident with? And which ones have we not really thought about much or misimplemented somehow that we can improve upon?
Yeah. So maybe you've got your own list of 10 things, but regardless if his shirt is ironed for photos or if I drop someone off 10 minutes late or if we don't have time to make it to a friend's birthday party, like, some of that we can let go. But these are the things that we really should like let dictate like how we're doing as parents, what we should focus on as a foundation for our kids to make sure that they're happy and healthy.
Yeah. All right. So if I'm asking you listeners, if you had an 11th tip, what would that be? And who can you talk to about some other core principles that you're trying to inculcate with your children to make them successful? And what's our title? Happy and Healthy Individuals.
Happy, healthy kids.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us once again. Again, if you haven't made your way over to iTunes to leave us a 5-star rating and a glowing review, we would love that. And also check out the relentlesspursuitpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to our email list and learn so much more about what we are doing in life.
Have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody. Thanks so much for listening to today's show. We hope you will use this conversation as a starting point for your own. We hope you're encouraged to think and act more intentionally.
If you want to learn more, you can visit our website, therelentlesspursuitpodcast.com, where you can find notes on today's show, plus additional blog posts, and you can subscribe to our free members list.
Please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends.
Facebook and Instagram are two great places to connect with us for daily doses of our quotable quotes, behind the scenes, and real-time photos, videos, and challenges.
Until next time, let us know how you are taking life off autopilot
And relentlessly pursuing what matters.